started, we're gonna start with an oval in the center of our page. You could draw as big as you'd like. Just keep in mind, he's got some big ears and they're gonna extend on the sides. So I'm gonna start with an oval, maybe the size of an egg on my page. Again, you could work a little bigger. I'm just keeping it very light as I start to block it in case I need to make those changes. I'm not worried about how clean this looks or how pretty it looks. I'm actually working pretty messy and sketchy. In fact, you'll see that I keep going over that shape until I like it. I actually recommend you do this as well. It's gonna help you get one that you're happy with. Now, anytime that you draw a character, you wanna use construction lines. For Dumbo, place in a vertical line going right through the center of this oval, just splitting it in half. And a tip for you whenever you draw characters is the eyeline placement usually hints at the age of the character. So older characters tend to have the eyeline higher, and then it starts off lower as a character is a baby and it moves up. So for Dumbo, he's a baby, so we're gonna place in a low eyeline. We're gonna place it maybe 3/4 of the way down, maybe even further. Once you have this, we're gonna start our approach that's known as general to specific. This means that we block out some of our largest and simplest shapes first so we can get a silhouette, and then we add in our details later. What makes baby characters really cute is their soft round cheeks. So I'm placing in a little C curve on each side of his face underneath where this eyeline goes. And I'm connecting them in the center with a little letter U shape, and this should basically line up with the bottom of your oval. You don't want to bring this down a lot further. Now, as I mentioned earlier, his iconic feature are those large ears, and so we're gonna block those in as well. I would start on each side pulling from the cheeks, and you wanna place in some letter U's on each side. From the top of his head, around here, maybe the forehead, I'm gonna give myself a light guideline of where I wanna bring the ears out. Now, the anatomy of the elephant's ear, they usually have a little bit more structure towards the top of their ear, and then the remaining part that's lower doesn't really have like cartilage or bone. It can just kind of move in the wind. Bless you. So we want to make sure to get a more structured portion for the top of the ear, and then we can have the bottom part a little bit flowier. Now keep in mind, I'm just drawing a specific pose for Dumbo's ear, but by no means does this mean you have to do this pose. You could draw him flying, you could draw his ears tied in a little bow, you could have one up, one down, totally up to you. Feel free to have fun with it. I just think having them kind of spread open like their wings really feels like Dumbo to me. And then I'm connecting these two with a curved line on the sides here. Keeping it light and loose, still not worried about the details. Now, as I mentioned with an elephant's ear having structure, the way we're going to achieve that in Dumbo's ear is by adding in what looks like this large L shape on each side. So it's pulling from the head and it goes up towards the outside of the ear and then down. So this part is like a firmer part of the ear. This all can move freely. Once you've drawn that, I want to start blocking in his trunk. And we're still working light and loose at this point. I'll let you know when we get a little bit darker with our lines. But for his trunk, we want it to be small and towards the bottom of his face. I would lightly block out, looks like a little grape or a little olive here resting at the bottom of his face. And again, just like I mentioned with the ears, any pose you want works. So if you want to draw him waving or eating a peanut or something, you totally can. I like to draw his trunk kind of curled into itself like he's timid or shy. So I pull from the side of that oval and I create this little letter J curve on the side here. On this side, I just bring down a line and it kind of looks like it's tucked into itself. I like it because it shows a little bit of personality. He's kind of like a timid, little cute baby character. But as I mentioned, we are now going to pause here. We've laid some groundwork, and I'm going to show you what you can lock in. Like for example, let's lock in the sides of the trunk and the bottom of the trunk. That's not going to change. If you're not familiar with the term locking in, it means you go back and you darken in all of the things you like, and you leave any of the things you don't like, and they will fade into the background as you go. You can already see from my sketch, those dark lines all of a sudden really read a lot better. So use this to your advantage. Something interesting about an elephant character, especially a baby one though, is elephants have a lot of wrinkles on them. But if you draw too many wrinkles on a baby elephant in animation, it might age up the character. So the animators found really clever ways to kind of check both boxes, but still make him feel like a baby elephant. So we're just gonna add in a few wrinkles. Basically draw a Wi-Fi symbol on his trunk, just 3, and it kind of gives the idea of wrinkles, but it's not too many. When you see an elephant from the front view, you usually don't see their mouth. So all we're gonna see from the ends of Dumbo's smile are like these little letter S curves on each side, just kind of pulling from the trunk, going up and out. I would say you're also good to lock in his cheeks and the sides of his face. Those aren't really gonna change at this point. Now this was the 5th Disney animated film. The first 4 films were Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi, and then this was the 5th film. And this film, even though it fits within the same category of films, they're all part of that golden era of animation, this film felt like a departure from the others in some ways. For one, this film was made on a very small budget compared to the other films. The other 4 films I mentioned were famous for having incredibly high budgets, not necessarily the intention, but Walt Disney was a perfectionist, and so he was just pouring more and more into these films to the point where they were kind of getting out of control with the budget. And he felt initially that he could do this because Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, when it came out, was actually the highest grossing film of all time at that point. And so he thought, I'm going to make the money back on these films, so I might as well pour the money in. But at this time, World War II was also starting to ramp up. And so the next 3 films, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi, did not make back the budget that they were being used. So these films actually lost quite a bit of amount of money. And so when Dumbo came around, they decided that they still were going to make another movie, but they could not make one with as high of a budget because they didn't know if it was going to make the money back. They just thought that's not good business. And so Dumbo was pitched as a low-budget film with high emotional stakes and story. And so the high emotions was to hopefully make the audience feel like they're not being cheated out of a high-quality film. That even if the film was cheaper to make, you wouldn't notice it because you were falling in love with the characters. And so that's what this film did, and I think it really delivered on it. I mean, if you've seen this film, it's probably one of the most emotional films Disney has ever done. I think for one scene alone, does anybody know which scene I'm probably talking about? Baby Mine, right? That song won an Oscar for this film for Best Original Song. The emotions in that scene really get to you every time. And it's moments like that where, again, they wanted the audience to feel like they were really getting something out of this movie. This movie is also one of our shortest films to date. It's our 3rd shortest animated film at Disney. It's only 1 hour and 4 minutes long. It just zipped by. The average animated film is about 1 hour 20, hour 30, so you can see again how much shorter this film is than the average film. And part of the reason why it's a short movie is it's actually, it was supposed to be a short film at Disney. It wasn't supposed to be a feature. This film is based off of a book called Dumbo the Flying Elephant, a children's book. And it's a pretty short story, so they were going to have this start off as a little short. But when they were looking for a movie to make on that smaller budget, they thought, Dumbo has potential. Let's just stretch it into a little bit longer and let's make it on a smaller budget. So that's what they ended up doing for this movie. And so it actually worked because other than Snow White, this was probably their most successful film of that early period of Disney. And so it really speaks to the story being so important. That's what's going to get an audience invested. I've gone back and I've drawn in little grape-sized eyes for him, trying to keep them a little bit further apart. That makes the character look more baby-like. And I have Dumbo looking out at you. You could have him look in any direction you'd like. That's not a rule for your drawing. And then finally, you'll see I've drawn in some eyelashes. This makes the character look really cute and innocent, very baby-like. I also think of the characters in Bambi. They all have these really long eyelashes and it makes them look really cute and adorable. Now, for the eyebrows, going back to what I said earlier about the wrinkles, we're going to draw in 2 hills or 2 rainbows for his brows because they also double as little wrinkles on his face. So we're going to do this on each side here. Once you've drawn in this, all we have left are really the little accessories he likes to wear. So I'm going to draw in his little circus hat on top of his head. It's going to start like you're drawing a bowl on top of his head. So I've just drawn in 2 lines, connect them at the bottom with a slight letter U shape here. And then I close this off at the top. So it's like you're about to draw on a bowl of froyo sitting on top of his head. For the top of this circus hat, it's going to be tilted over. So I would start by drawing in something that looks like a weird letter P. And then you're just going to have it pull down into the bowl shape. Now, this film actually shares a surprising amount of similarities to a film from the 2000s, a film that was set in Hawaii. Does anybody know which movie I'm talking about? I heard it, yeah, Lilo and Stitch, right? Now you might be thinking, what do these films have in common? They're very different. Well, for one, the way I described Dumbo being pitched as a small budget film with high emotional stakes, that's exactly how Lilo and Stitch was pitched, because both movies came after a line of films that were very expensive that did not make the money back. And so both of these films were seen as like recovery films. They needed to make the money back. Both films were some of the highest grossing films of their respective decades. And also, Dumbo is the only Disney protagonist in a film, the main character, who doesn't speak in the movie. He's the only one. And Lilo and Stitch was originally supposed to do that too. Stitch was not supposed to be a speaking role. That's something that changed later into the story. Both of these films feature a unique art style where they have watercolor backgrounds in the film versus a different style of more opaque paint. And then finally, both of these films deal with themes of being a misfit, feeling isolated, and trying to find your place of belonging. And so this was not just something I came up with. The directors of Lilo and Stitch really wanted to draw that connection to this movie, because even in Lilo and Stitch, when we're in Lilo's bedroom, we see a little Dumbo plushie in her room. And so it's, again, there's a lot of similarities between these films. They share a lot of similar themes and emotions, even though the characters and settings are very, very different. So I always think that's really fascinating. I'm going back and I'm locking in his little circus collar. It's just a bunch of wavy lines going from one side to the other. Don't think about it too much. Now, I mentioned this character doesn't speak, and one of the reasons we're able to still follow the story is not only the great emotional acting in this film, but also there's a character in this movie who's Dumbo's friend, and he does a lot of the narrating. Does anybody know who that is? Timothy Q. Mouse, right? Now that character was actually added for the film. That character did not appear in the book. In the book, Dumbo did have a friend, but it wasn't a mouse. It was a little bird. It was a robin. And so that was one of the few changes they made to this story to make sure that, again, we were really following what's going along. And I think they just liked the idea of having a little mouse friend for Dumbo. Go back, lock in whatever standing out from the remainder of the ears here. Make sure we're rounding off any of those sharp features, because in animation, sharp features tend to be saved for one type of character in particular. Does anybody want to take a guess? Yeah, villains, right? Think of like Scar, Jafar, Maleficent. They got very sharp features, and then our friendly characters have soft features. Bless you. On top of that, he's a baby elephant. It would be really weird to see a very sharp, angular baby elephant, right? It would be very, very weird looking. So just go back, lock in your favorite lines. Once you've locked in the ears, though, that is your final step for drawing Dumbo. Anything else you want to add at this point is going to be considered extra credit. So if you want to draw his lucky feather, maybe you want to draw Timothy with him, maybe you want to draw his mom, totally up to you. Once you're done adding in your extra credit for Dumbo, your very last step whenever you draw a character is you're going to want to find somewhere on your page to sign your name nice and proud, because you've drawn your very own Dumbo.